What was she like to work with?
Oh, when we first met, before we did the pilot, I said, she was 12 years younger than I. And I said, Carl, she's awfully young. And she had this kind of mid-Atlantic accent, like a Katharine Hepburn. She had never done comedy.
He's one of the most beloved faces in television history. Charming, funny, and seemingly full of endless joy. But after nearly a century in the spotlight, the dark truth behind Dick Van Dyke's smile is finally being exposed. We're talking about bitter backstage betrayals, dream-crushing abandonments, and a secret list of people who wronged him. Some were Hollywood legends, others were his closest partners. But the one person he could truly never forgive was himself. What happened behind the curtain that led to decades of private torment? Who were the stars that dimmed his shine? And why did he let it happen for so long? Subscribe now before we reveal the unforgettable truth. On screen, Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore were the perfect television couple. Their chemistry was electric, their timing was flawless, and audiences adored their loving glances. But behind the scenes, things were far more tangled. Dick later admitted to what many had long suspected. He had a powerful, all-consuming crush on his much younger co-star. He'd even questioned if Mary, just 25 at the time, was too young for the role. That doubt faded as their on-screen magic took hold, but his personal feelings only grew stronger. While they remained professional, the unspoken attraction created a tense undercurrent on set. Every shared scene became a delicate dance of restraint, making the work emotionally exhausting for Dick. He wasn't just acting. He was managing a secret he couldn't let anyone see. Mary herself later joked that never having an affair was a terrible waste, a sentiment Dick heartbreakingly echoed. It was a quiet heartbreak, born from respect and restraint. But the tension between them wasn't just personal, it was about to fuel a professional jealousy that would poison the set. In the early days of the Dick Van Dyke Show, comedy veteran Rose Marie thought she knew her place. As a seasoned performer, she believed she was signed on as the female lead, the sharp-witted Sally Rogers. But as the show exploded in popularity, the spotlight shifted dramatically to Mary Tyler Moore. Suddenly, scripts focused more on Rob's home life, and Rose Marie saw her lines and punchlines dwindle. Feeling sidelined, she confronted the show's creator, Carl Reiner, only to be met with a comment that would sting for decades. He reportedly told her, "You both have great legs. They just prefer to look at hers." For a woman who built her career on talent and wit, being reduced to her looks was a deep insult. Dick was caught in the middle, watching the set become a silent battleground where forced laughter barely concealed the bruised egos. The joy of their ensemble was replaced by a quiet, bitter competition. This on-set fracture was a painful lesson in Hollywood loyalty, but it was a lesson Dick had already learned years before, when his very first creative partner vanished without a word, leaving him completely shattered. Before he was a TV icon, Dick Van Dyke was one half of a silent comedy duo, the Merry Mutes. Alongside his partner, Phil Erickson, he lip-synced old records and pantomimed stories with a chemistry that was pure magic. It was Erickson who believed in Dick first, and together they hit the club circuit hard, their act eventually exploding onto national television. They were on the brink of something huge. Then, in 1953, with no warning, Phil Erickson walked away. He didn't just leave the act, he quit show business entirely. There was no fight, no scandal, just a quiet, sudden void. Dick was left stunned and directionless, the rug pulled out from under him. He had found a creative soulmate, and just as they were about to succeed, he was gone. This silent abandonment was a brutal lesson in the fragility of partnership. The sudden loss of that creative spark made him wary of ever fully relying on anyone again. He spent years grinding through minor roles, struggling to recapture that magic alone. Then, a man entered his life who would not just give him a second chance, he would hand him a legend. That man was Carl Reiner, and he didn't just create the Dick Van Dyke Show in many ways. He was the show. It was based on his life, and he only handed the lead role to Dick after the network hesitated. From day one, the power dynamic was set. Dick was the star, but he was a guest in someone else's creative house. As the show soared, his frustration grew. He respected Reiner's genius but resented having no control over the project that bore his name. Years later, Reiner joined Dick's new, edgier sitcom. But when the network censored a controversial episode, Reiner walked off the set and never came back. For Dick, it was a devastating repeat of his past. The show lost its creative heart and slowly collapsed. He had been handed a career by a genius, only to have it snatched away again. The shadow of Carl Reiner taught Dick a costly lesson. Being the star doesn't mean you're in charge. But he was about to enter a world of magic, working for an even bigger icon, and he would soon discover that sometimes the man who opens the door is the same one who lets the storm roll in. That man was Walt Disney, and the film was Mary Poppins. The role of Bert the Chimney Sweep turned Dick into a global superstar, but the story behind the magic was anything but whimsical. From the very beginning, he was left to fend for himself. When he wanted to play the second role of the elderly bank director, he had to pay for his own screen test. Then came the infamous Cockney accent that would haunt him for decades. His dialect coach was an Irishman who, by Dick's own admission, didn't know the accent any better than he did. The worst part? Not a single person on set, not the director, and not Walt Disney, ever told him how bad it was. They let him create a performance that would make him a punchline for life. After pouring his heart into the film, Disney's silence during the public backlash was deafening. He was left completely exposed. The experience taught him a bitter truth. Even in the Magic Kingdom, loyalty is just an illusion. But the betrayals from partners, mentors, and studio chiefs would pale in comparison to the war he was fighting in private. His most formidable enemy wasn't in Hollywood at all. In fact, he was staring right back at him in the mirror. For decades, as Dick Van Dyke made the world laugh, he was fighting a secret, losing battle with himself. Fame didn't just change his life, it fractured his soul. While audiences saw the charming family man, he was privately descending into alcoholism. The pressure to be on all the time led to a dependency that crept in fast, turning the joyful star into an angry, withdrawn man he barely recognized. But the drinking was only a symptom of a deeper crisis. While still married to his first wife, Margie, he began a long-running affair with Michelle Triola. The guilt of this double life was crushing. He was adored as America's wholesome husband, but he felt like a complete phony, torn apart by the person he was pretending to be and the man he had secretly become. He was haunted by the fact that he had become someone he himself would have judged. The hardest part wasn't just the addiction or the shame of his actions. It was the daily burden of putting on the mask, of waking up every morning to perform as the happy-go-lucky entertainer while his real self was quietly drowning. From unspoken love on a soundstage to cold betrayals by Hollywood's most powerful men, Dick Van Dyke's journey was paved with far more than just charm and laughter. But his greatest wars were never fought on a stage. They were fought in the quiet moments of guilt, regret, and the fight for redemption. Today, at nearly 100 years old, he still dances and still smiles, a testament to his incredible resilience. The miracle isn't that he became a legend. It's that he survived the weight of that legend and managed to become whole again, finally closing the gap between the man on screen and the man in the mirror. Thanks for watching. If you were surprised by the hidden story of Dick Van Dyke's life, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into Hollywood's forgotten history. And don't go anywhere, click the video on your screen to watch the next story we know you'll love.